Periodically, Coach Pete Coulson joins us to talk about some of the issues of the day. And today being one of those days as well, 6 minutes after 8 o'clock, we're at 62 on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. Most sports fans in Idaho know Coach Pete quite well. Although if he's been refereeing the sport and your kid was playing, perhaps you know him, but you're not always happy with him. But those things do happen. That's part of the job. Bill Colley with you, too, on Magic Valley this morning. I got 62. Did I give you the time already? I think it's 6 minutes after 8 o'clock. I wasn't looking at the clock. I just did. I confirmed that. It's true. But first of all, Coach, welcome back to the show.
Well, glad to be on the air with you again. Always appreciate our time together.
Yeah, this morning, some of the discussion we've been having, and it's been kind of wide-ranging on a variety of different topics, but in many ways, they're so closely related because ultimately it all comes back to human relations and how we're going to be treating each other. And the first message I had from you this morning was about the situation with Bubba Wallace, where he had said that he saw a noose in his garage at the track, and for a couple of days this was worldwide news, and then an investigation determined somebody had tied a rope to the door to raise and lift it. And Wallace, I think, is still, he's still not happy about the situation, even though it turned out it was nobody making any sort of threat in his situation, but my take on it is Bubba Wallace is a good driver, but not a great driver, and he may be looking at this as a way to, from a marketing standpoint, to get his name out there. I'm putting ideas into his head. I don't know. But you commented about this as well and pointed out that, Bubba Wallace is from a mixed-race family. In other words, he can't really look in any direction and cast aspersions on anyone else because so many Americans are such a mix anymore genetically from so many different parts of the world.
Well, yeah, I sent you my DNA, didn't I?
Yeah, that was rather fascinating to look at.
And it's back to my old story. You can't judge a book by its cover. And so many people get so caught up in all this rhetoric. If they really looked at their own DNA, we are all part of the human race. Some have higher percentage of one versus the other, but we're part of the human race. And that's what we forget so many times. We get so caught up in this class system or race system that we forget about the fact we're individuals. We have black people that have O blood positive, white people O blood positive. We all bleed the same blood. And so why can't we connect ourselves in that concept? Yes, there's been things done in society there's been a lot of injustices. But let's not dwell on that. Let's become victorious, not victims.
Well, and I saw a comment today about Wallace's situation where it said, perhaps it's time to admit that our society is a little too eager to find hate crimes where there are none. There, as you point out, there have been injustices. There will continue to be injustices. But we've got to be a little careful because the tensions right now are so high in this country. We better be really, really careful before we come out and say that we've been the victim of one of these.
Right. I mean, I think that, you got to think before you talk. And you got to kind of check the facts out and have a conversation with people that really, what's really going on? Are you looking for it? Or you look to create peace? And I think that it's your perspective. When you have someone make some kind of a disparaging remark to you, do you look to punch them in the mouth? Or do you look to, okay, let's have a conversation about what you just said. Where are you coming from with this? And let's have those kind of discussions. And I think that's a big lacking in our society. We don't have conversation anymore. We just jump to conclusion without checking the facts.
I think about reactions that people are having around the country, and I think I'm not going to say it's an overreaction in some cases. Although when Cathy, whose father founded Chick-fil-A, is washing people's feet, I know he's trying to live out his life as a Christian, but he's also taken some criticism for it as well, and it's. I cannot speak for his decision and what he's doing, but I think that some people are feeling so much guilt that they're trying to do certain things to hopefully placate the other side, and I wonder sometimes if maybe that's going a little too far, that perhaps it becomes not necessarily Christian, but more appeasement in some cases.
Yeah, I'm not the one to judge that, but I have some of those same questions myself. Is what are we doing here? Why can't we just stick to what our mission and what our passion is without compromising things? I think of Drew Brees. what he said, he had a right to say, and then all of a sudden they had to backtrack. And I don't know where that is coming from, in a lot of these kind of situations. I just wonder if the money speaks louder than the message.
And I think, too, there's sometimes if you're on a team, you do worry about hurting a teammate's feelings, and because you have to have some cohesiveness. And so sometimes you may backtrack on something. But think of that situation if Drew Brees had said, look, guys, I want you to understand my position as well, and what sacrifices my grandfathers made.
Yes.
He might have been able to get that conversation going with teammates instead of just saying, sorry.
Right. I agree. That's exactly right. You need to kind of elaborate on what you said so there's a clear understanding about what your perspective is. Because if you don't understand it, how can you really address it in a very proactive way with your teammate or anybody else?
I saw a couple of pieces today, and I think I emailed you the link to one of them from Erickson, he's got a theological degree, I believe, in Presbyterian Church in America. And at his website, there's another writer by the name of Peter Heck, who's also, I think, in the same denomination. But he said that that they're both trying to struggle with this because people are asking from a perspective of your churches, what should be your response to Black Lives Matter and some of the concerns that are going on?
Right. And I look at some of the passages in Scripture, and there are wars in the Bible, people against each other. But the common denominator was God's love and grace. He loved the world. There's no subtitles. All have sinned. There's no subtitles. And we tend to forget that we're all part of the human race. Now, if you're not faith-based, you struggle with that because you probably associate God or the strictness or the structure of Christianity with your parents and saying, well, my parents were strict and God's got some strict rules. I don't know why I don't follow them. And so there's a lot of that understanding of your relationship with God with your personal parents. And that sometimes can be diluted into the fact that I don't want to do anything with Christianity. And that's where you have to really tread very lightly with some of those people and say, okay, I understand your situation, but let's have this conversation. Let's have it in a proactive way, not a reactive way.
There's this one writer, his name is Peter Heck, and he says that at his church they had a meeting of the elders to try to figure out their best response. And he said one of the men paraphrased Martin Luther King in reference to the discussion, the importance of pursuing a colorblind society. But he said, I spoke up, he says, and I told them that the notion of colorblindness is no longer desired or wanted. I'm not kidding when I say that the looks I received, he says, were as if I was speaking a foreign language. He said, I continued expressing that given my careers outside the church, I come into frequent contact with the narrative of the world and the template of pop culture. And he said, at this stage of the game, he said, people want to be recognized for their differences because they'll argue their experiences and their sufferings that they're different than mine. And so they don't want to hear all lives matter. That to them, they're offended when they hear that. But how do you address that as a Christian?
And I always default to that. All lives matter. I don't care where you're coming from. All lives matter. Let me understand your journey and be sensitive to that journey, be empathetic to that journey, and let's press forward. Let's not start dividing ourselves by putting these color attributes before any situation and make it a race issue. Let's make it a relationship issue. I had a conversation with a college buddy of mine. I think I sent you the link. He's a pastor in Roseburg. We kind of talked about some of these things. How can the church impact this? And I think that's by sitting down with people that are not of your faith, possibly not of your ethnicity, but have these conversations so you get a better understanding where they're coming from and have those conversations that are sometimes painful, but they have to be done.
We were talking about sports just a couple of minutes ago. We talked about Drew Brees and Bubba Wallace and the like. And one thing I can say about how, people sometimes, maybe they think that we shouldn't be playing certain games because they're a little rough, but there were people I played ball with who I'd never gotten along with until I found myself on a team with them. And by mid-season, they were the best friends I had. It didn't come down to your class, what class you belonged to or what your color was or anything else. You just discovered you had a real camaraderie But that
Get a
comes
common
from
goal.
yeah, but that comes too from being with people who are different.
Yes.
Versus segregating.
Right. I think we're becoming more segregated because of all these issues, rather than uniting. And some of these things happened 100 years ago. Come on, folks. These are pieces of history. Yes, they were damaging. When you listen to some of those people, I've watched some YouTubes of some of these 83-year-old people that lived through slavery. They made it, but they made it through hard work. They had to overcome these things and develop resiliency in this process. I look at Elder from Fox News. He had a little YouTube on about the fact he hadn't talked to his dad since he was 15, about 10 years. And he sat down with his dad, and his dad, well, let me tell you something, son. This is what I did. And he had to eat humble pie because his dad told him his story about working hard to help the family survive. We need to listen to those stories and understand that these people weren't denying that these things occurred, but they rose above those things. They weren't victims. They were victorious through these things and not let those things drive their agenda.
Well, we got to remind people, too, you were born in a part of the world that at one time had been part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and
right.
People there still say, well, in 1381, your people did this to my people. We don't want to get into a situation like that.
Right. I think that the history teaches us what we can do better tomorrow. We tend to forget that, and that's what I struggle with. It's just like if I were an audience, I usually ask an audience, okay, where do you think I came from? And what are my favorite foods? And they'll come up with watermelon and chitlins and all these kind of things. They say L.A., Chicago, Illinois. And I'll say, no, you know what? I like sauerkraut and Wiener Schnitzel. And they go, what? I grew up in Austria. I'm Austrian. Well, you're not white? Well, no, I'm not. But you've made an assumption on something you have no idea about. And then we get in some of these conversations, and I don't do that to kind of embarrass people, but it's just to help them understand you cannot judge a book by its cover. You have to get into somebody's life, understand where they're coming from, and what are the processes of life that define them who they are today.
I was going to say your choices of food, though, were pretty good. I still had a wing of the family that would eat a lot of that, too, and especially at the holidays. And I, now that you brought it up, you've made me hungry.
We need to go to the Schnitzel Garden here in Boise when you come there sometime.
Yeah.
It's got some good Wiener Schnitzels there.
I'll tell you, and I love any sort of cabbage, no matter how you prepare it. So
yeah.
That's a worldwide thing, though. Hey, we got to take a short break, but okay. You can stick around for a few more minutes,
yes.
right?
Yes.
I want to mention Coach Pete Coulson is joining us this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We're at 64. It's coming up on 20 minutes after 8. Bill Colley with you on Magic Valley this morning. I'm here until 10 o'clock, of course. I'm in the lead-in for the Rush Limbaugh program, or at least locally. A few years ago, I was having a conversation. It was 4 years ago. I was at the state Republican convention, and one of the speakers there, Buck Sexton, was filling in for Russia that next week, and I said, I'm your lead-in. He looked at me for a minute. I said, well, in a small part of the country. All right, we've got more on the way. It is 63 and 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. We have a few more minutes with Coach Pete Coulson this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com, 23 minutes after 8 o'clock. And it's 62. Bill Colley on Magic Valley this morning. I'm here until 10 a.m. I was just talking off air with Coach Pete about our young selves. First of all, a lot of people are, we're somehow now responsible for the sins of our ancestors in many cases, and more so, I guess, than ever before in the United States. But additionally, and I was sharing with him, there were things I did and I said when I was a 15-year-old that were pretty stupid. But, close to 45 years later now, you are somewhat of a different person. And, Coach, we're even forcing people who are just kids, who are immature. They're sometimes facing huge backlashes. I mean, they're threatened with job losses and things years later after something they said or did when they were 13, 14, 15 years old. How do we get this back on track?
That's a very complicated question and a complicated answer, because I think if we look ourselves in the mirror, we all are guilty of some infraction in life. We all have failed others in various ways. And if we get this better than I mentality, we forget the message, the fact that we all are human beings. We're all prone to mistakes. We do stupid things as youngsters. We do stupid things as adults. But in this process of life, let's have an attitude of grace and mercy and understand people in this process. As a coach, I had kids on my team that I knew had done poor things, but were placed on there by the judge to mentor them to be the best they can be, to help them overcome this. Maybe it's just an issue of anger and how to control that. But allow these people, give everybody the grace and the mercy that God has given you. And that's part of the process is we're never going to have a perfect society. It's impossible. But let's make it the best we can be by loving one another, respecting one another, understanding that we all fail at different points in our life.
I have a note that just came in from Doug. He's listening in Teton Valley this morning. He listens like you do on the app, I should point out, but he said, my son grew up as a Teton Redskin wrestling and playing football against Sugar. He said there was a mutual hatred based on competition. But his first year at ISU, he ends up with a roommate and teammates with two kids from Sugar, and he says they are now all close friends today. Lesson learned. That speaks volumes.
Yes, and I think that's the thing. I think through competition, there comes camaraderie. And I think if people in leadership would not always want to be right, but want to learn, we have a better sense of a community, because if you're always right, you never learn. And I think that's part of the problem in our churches, in a lot of different avenues. I'm better than you are. Are you really? You may have a different sets of skills, but unitedly, we can do more together. I look at the concept of team. Together, everybody achieves more. I think by our differences, together we can do more because we recognize those honestly and move forward. And I think that's the process of that. As a coach, you recognize you don't have all the answers or you can't stop everything, but as a united front, as a team, we can be successful. We may have to go through some battles to get there, but in the long run, we can achieve. And it's the same thing with life. Those avenues, those things that come our way that are painful, help us become better in the long run of life. I mean, I've gone through a divorce. Am I proud of it? No. But those are some obstacles in my life I've had to learn to overcome. And we all have those on a daily basis if we're honest with ourselves.
I remember playing ball, and my close friends and I, none of us were going to be all-stars. However, I think the coach liked having three of us on the team because we kept everybody loose on the bus or in the locker room because, we were in generally good humor. And
Right.
If your teammates are laughing, they're not always tense about the game coming up. So your role on a team, I mean, obviously, a lot of that comes down to, you bring a lot of different skill sets when you bring people together. And not all of them are the guy who scores all the touchdowns. Some of those are the guy that, keeps everybody on keel.
Right. Well, I think it's not only sports, whether in a choir, whether in a band or some other extracurricular activity. I was a bus driver for a singing group when I went to Western Baptist. We had two different groups. One was a jovial one was a serious one. Both produced what they needed to produce to help change the world, but they did it in different processes. And that was a very good learning experience for me because I saw two different groups. One was very academic. The other ones were just a bunch of clowns. And I learned that both can benefit each other. But we need to be open to that and allow that to take place, because what I learned with some of the academic people, they had a lot of head knowledge, but it didn't go to the heart. And I think that's the thing, is we have to get what we learn and get it to a heart, get it to the level that we understand others, don't mimic other people. And that's what happens with academia sometimes. We know a lot of stuff, and we say, well, doctor this, doctor that said that. What do you think? And how does it mold you as the person that you're going to become tomorrow?
Always good to hear from you and some of the morning wisdom. And you kind of keep me on track during the morning with the commentary that you send my way. I'm thankful for that, too.
Your passion for what you do, and I just keep up the work, my friend. God bless you.
Well, no. This is not really work. I have to confess to that They give me a paycheck. It's like going to the playground every day and somebody says, "Here you go. Here's some money."
Yeah, but you have to kind of learn how to be very discerning in some of your comments just to help people understand what is really going on in our society. And that we need more of that. And we need some of that in our churches.
Amen.
We can't just sit. I mean, I love the pastors roundtable. I like to sit down with some of those men sometimes, just have a discussion about how can we change the world to be compassionate and empathetic and have empathy over some of these issues, because some of those people, that's how they see the world. But you got to get them beyond that. It's just as a sinner coming to the feet of Jesus saying, "Hey, I accept your forgiveness. Help me to walk in your spirit." And we need to help people do that on a daily basis, and that's the challenge on a daily basis.
Well, Coach, thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Okay, God bless you, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you, and God bless you too. 66 right now. We've got a short break. It's 8:30 on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you on Magic Valley this morning.